Ladies and gentlemen, welcome your faces back to the N.E.S.T podcast, I believe. This is episode 4. Thank you everyone for joining, I really appreciate it. Now, today we're going to be talking about something very, I want to say controversial. It's not really that controversial. Also, YouTube, really quickly, before I get off to this, I really apologise for last week's not being up until today. That was because I had to go away from home. I had to actually go to work and I could not upload it, which kind of sucked, but you get the double trouble in today, so that's always a plus. So now let's go to today's topic. All right, today's topic, and it's muscular activation. So when people say, oh, I'm gonna go do like a lat pull down or like a glute raise to activate my muscles and make sure they're getting used, does that have any scientific form of research behind it? Is it proved to work? Now today's suggestion is by Emily Cronwell. Thank you, Emily. Emily __ Cromwell, CROMWELL. Now guys, remember that if you want to be shouted out in the next episode, please do share our posts on Instagram and tag us in them, of course, so we can see them. So thank you to Lauren for sharing the post. Really appreciate it. Now, so what is muscle activation? What is muscle activation? What do people mean when they say I'm going to go and activate my muscle? Yeah, it sounds a little bit weird, but it's basically an exercise to make you feel the muscle work. It can also be called mind-muscle connection. So that's something that a lot of studies that I looked at. So it's mind-muscle connection. It basically increase your mind-muscle connection, and there's a thought behind that will then increase hypertrophy. Those who did not know hypertrophy or hypertrophy, as English people say, let's call it hypertrophy. So hypertrophy is basically where the muscle increases in size and sometimes even strength, but that's not hypertrophy. That's completely different. Also, quickly get my water. There we go. Perfect. I've got my water. I do not have any Smarties today, so you will not be hearing me munch away at some Smarties. So I'm sure that was very annoying last week. But so what makes it something? It's an exercise to make you feel the muscle work, increase mind-muscle connection. The other name that it is referred to a lot is attentional focus. Don't ask why attentional focus. I've got no clue why they decided to call it that, but we'll roll with it. We'll believe in the literature and the research. So, the theory behind activation exercises would increase activation of said muscle. So let's say if you were to do a tricep extension before going into the bench press or a chest fly, you would feel those muscles would increase in activation respectively. So let's say if you were to do a chest fly during the bench press exercise, your chest, your pectoralis major, would activate more than your tricep brachii or brachii, whatever the hell you want to call them. And secondly, it would diminish contribution of secondary muscles. Now, what would that mean? As said, so let's take the chest press, for example. If you were to do a pec fly, it would reduce the contribution to the bench press from the triceps or indeed the deltoids. Evidence seems to indicate that activation does not always coincide with reductions of secondary muscle movers. So, by the looks of it, we don't actually see any form of secondary muscle reduction. That is just the theory behind it. So, another thing that these studies talk a lot about things like EMG activity, which is an electromyograph, basically showing how active that muscle is in a certain movement. They basically attach like little blobs on your skin, and you can basically see how much a muscle is moving or how much is contributing towards said exercise. Now, EMG activity does not always equal hypertrophy. It literally just says that the muscle is actually working. You're not paralyzed. It says a little bit more than that, but that's like, basic sum up. So I've got three studies today to go through, and I'm not going to go the same boring fashion as I did last week where I just read out every exercise. Instead, I will just be touching on a few points and then backing them up with what said research has shown. So let me start off by saying that this depends. So the muscle activation has shown to sometimes is the key word here, increase hypertrophy. Having said that, it varies from muscle to muscle. So for example, Catalud et al. In 2016 trained 18 resistance trained men, 1 rep max pre the test, 1 rep max post the test, and gave them 3 different conditions. So we had the regular bench press, as everyone knows and loves, the pectoralis with focus on the pectoralis major, so they said this time try and feel the pec working, and then bench with focus on the tricep brachii. So they then gave them the cue of, with this exercise, try and engage your triceps, try and feel your triceps more. So they were working on that mind-muscle connection instead of giving them a cue where, for example, to activate your triceps, you would say, try pushing the bar, but when you're pushing it, try and pull it apart. So when you're doing this movement, which is tricep extension, when you're trying to pull the bar apart, that would activate your triceps a little bit more. Whereas let's say if they were to say, but this time when you're pushing, try and bend the bar. So bending the bar would activate a little bit more of your chest. So they didn't really try and actively give the participants a cue. They weren't giving them a cue, they were just telling them to focus on something, which it's great, but it's good, but it's not quite Carling. It doesn't really cut it. So what they saw is actually there was an increase when they got told to focus on the pectoralis major. There was actually an increase in activity by approximately 7 points. Okay, so 7 points. However, these do vary on 1 rep max percentage. So at 80% and above, it was actually very counterintuitive. So they were actually lower activation in said muscles. So which is really interesting. I'm really curious to see why that is. So I'll give you guys an example. These are in microvolts, so the EMG counts in microvolts because that is electric activity. Don't get me wrong, it's not going to shock you and kill you. It's micro, so it's tiny. But at 20% of someone's 1 rep max on bench, they increase by 7 microvolts when they focused on the pectoralis compared to the regular. This at 20%, at 40% it was 5, at 50% it was 6, at 60% it was 9. So by the looks of it, 9 is the main, how would I call it? It's the main threshold, I guess you could say, the main beneficial area. So when you're training at 80% of 60%, sorry, of your 1 rep max, focusing on your chest will activate it a little bit more. Again, please keep in mind that activation does not always mean hypertrophy. They've got minimal correlation, and there's actually a few studies that have shown the fact that if someone's activating their muscles more, they're not quite growing. Okay, triceps, the complete opposite was shown. So with lower 1 rep max percentages, you actually saw higher increases of activity. So at 20% of 1 rep max on the tricep EMG, they showed that at 20% they actually focused more on the triceps, so there was more activation by 11 microvolts on average. And then as they got higher in percentage, the activation got a little bit lower. Fairly similar to what we saw in the previous trend, but the previous trend obviously had 60% as like an outlier, as an anomaly, if you will. So it's not, I would not use this as a, what would I call it? I wouldn't use this as like a holy grail. Okay, so again, if you feel like, if you thoroughly believe that EMG activity does cause hypertrophy, then feel free, go for it. Try and focus on said muscles and whatever. But personally, I would not go out of my way. And this paper here is actually, it's talked about by a guy called Halperin and Vygotsky a little bit further down the line, but we will not touch on that just yet, because that will be the other side of the argument. So this is the first side of the argument that Christ, I'm tired. Excuse me. This is the first kind of side of the fence that we're looking at. We're not looking at the other one yet. So as we can see here, there is proof, well, there's evidence that supports the hypothesis of the more you try and focus, the higher the EMG activity will be. So that's, no one can say otherwise at that. Again, larger hypertrophy gains, though, that doesn't correlate respectively to hypertrophy. So Schoenfeld, again, anyone who is interested in this area, you will know Schoenfeld is the golden, he's the golden boy of strength and conditioning, anatomy and physiology, all that kind of stuff. He's bloody amazing at this stuff, and huge respect to him. But to investigate, this guy wanted to do an experiment to investigate the effects of using an internal versus external focus of attention during resistance training on muscular adaptation. So he is actually looking at hypertrophy here. He's not just looking at EMG activity, he is actually looking on the muscular adaptations, which I think is very important, because again, looking at EMG activity is great, amazing, perfect. You tell me that my muscles are activating and firing a little bit more, perfect. However, I need to know if that will give me a significant advantage, and emphasis on significant here, if it will give me a significant advantage against my competition. Because if there's like a bodybuilder, right, Mr. Olympia bodybuilder, like top of the range, and he wants that extra, I don't know, like half a kilo of weight, a little bit lower body fat, a little bit of extra centimeters around his arms, will focusing on his biceps, triceps, whatever, will that actually help him? Because if not, then he's wasting his time. He could be doing an extra couple of sets, he could be doing an extra couple of reps, he could be doing whatever. And as I said, I'll touch on this a little bit further down the line, but is it worth it by the looks, but from this perspective? So Schoenfeld took 30 untrained men. Okay, so this is where we need to also keep in mind, someone who does not have previous weight training will experience something called newbie gains. Now, to those of you who do not know, newbie gains is basically where your muscles have not been trained before. They have not had the stimulus of resistance training. It's almost like it would be. How do I explain this? Yeah, it's a lot easier for them to adapt, basically, is what I'm saying. So untrained men adapt a lot. Untrained people in general adapt a lot better to resistance training than trained men. To anyone who does economics, this is the law of diminishing returns. You will probably know this. Basically, the more you train, the less and less and less and less you get out of it. So let's say if this is the amount of time, if down here is the time, up here is so if you got time on the x-axis and you have got growth on the y-axis, it really flattens out as you go up. So at the start it's increasing linearly and probably not exponentially. It increases linearly for the first couple of years maybe, and then after that it starts to flatten out to the point where after 10 to 15 years it's pretty much flat. The gains you are making are literally like 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, 0.5% at best. So it does. There is that factor to take into account when looking at the studies. The fact that it's on untrained men, and which means that obviously they will be responding a little bit better to these to this resistance training and these programs, resistance training programs. So 30 untrained men assigned to internal versus external focus groups both had a number of 15 people. So the internal group focused on the muscle contractions. So let's say if they were doing a bicep curl, they were focusing on feeling their muscle pull their arm up towards their shoulder. Whereas the external focused on the outcome of the lift, basically just trying to get the weight up. They weren't really focusing on feeling the muscle, or they weren't envisioning like the sacromeres kind of pulling towards each other, stuff like that. So that's as again, both had 15 people. 27 out of 30 people actually finished the study, which is an issue. It's not great, but you know, people drop out. It happens. So both groups had 3 different sessions on non-consecutive days for 8 weeks. So let's say they had Monday, Wednesday, Friday. That's it. So 8 weeks. 3 days a week training, and they had 4 sets between 8 to 10 reps per exercise to do. Body composition and anthropometry, which in English means height, muscle thickness, isometric muscle strength were taken, so they were recorded. I will not go on to how these were recorded because that is obviously that's a little bit too much information, but basically the height, body fat, muscle thickness, and isometric muscle strength were measured. Now isometric, those who do not know what isometric is let's say a wall sit is an isometric exercise, a plank is an isometric exercise. Anything else, so let's say a bench press, is not an isometric exercise. Isometric is anything that will keep a muscle at pretty much the same length throughout, and it will put stress through that muscle. So the muscle is basically, imagine if you were trying to pull my arm down while I was trying to hold it up, and my arm wasn't moving. It's contracting isometrically. It's not moving at all. So that's what isometric means. It's not concentric. It's not eccentric. Concentric is when the muscle shortens. Eccentric is when the muscle lengthens during a contraction. This is isometric. It's staying still. So that's what isometric muscle strength is. Now, here are the results. Okay, so they found 2.14, very specific, 2.1 increase in millimeters around the elbow flexor, which is the bicep. So they found a 2.14 millimeter increase in the bicep in the internal group, which by the looks of it, this is looking very promising. 6.9 Newton meters increase in isometric elbow flexion. To those of you who do not know what that means that the isometric elbow flexor, Jesus, words, Alex. So the isometric elbow flexor strength increased. So again, their biceps got a little bit stronger. The rectus femoris, which is one of the 4 quad muscles, thickness benefited external, but not significantly. So the thickness of the rectus femoris benefited the external group, but again, that was a mild and pretty much non-significant increase. Non-significant basically just means that after looking at all of the results and comparing them to each other, they found that it's not really worth mentioning. So they put it in there, but they said, look, it doesn't do a great deal. Like, it's to the point where you probably won't even notice it. Vastus lateralis, which is another quad muscle, was equal in every way. Isometric knee extension. So the knee extension is your quad. That's your knee extender. Benefited external but small significance. So that's, a little bit. Again, body fat, 0.52% decrease. 0.52% decrease in favor of the internal group. But again, that is really small significance. So by the looks of it, most of these are actually little significance or small significance. So the only ones that are actually decent enough to measure were the isometric elbow flexion strength and the elbow flexor size. So this paper, basically what it's telling us is that internal focus is better than external focus for the hypertrophy of the elbow flexor, and that is about it. In 30 men, the only thing they found is that it actually just improves your bicep size just a little bit by 2.1 millimeters. And funny enough, I've actually got a ruler right here, and those of you who are watching on the tubes, you will see that 0.2 millimeters is, you probably can't even see it, to be honest. It's literally, it's tiny. It's really tiny. It's I'm not gonna lie to you, I would not go through that amount of faff for 2 millimeters of extra bicep size. That's not, in my head, it's not really worth it. Now, sorry, just quickly before I carry on, I completely forgot this will be a fairly short episode, purely because I will have to go to the gym and work out my own biceps at some point today. So bicep brachii improved a little bit, nothing too fancy. 2 millimeters, that's 0.2 of a centimeter. That is pathetic. Again, though, if you're a big time bodybuilder, then that 0.2 will be significant for you. Okay. So, what have we seen until now? So until now, we can see that there is a benefit to doing to internally focusing, but the benefit is not actually that great by the looks of it. It's not, there's no form of massive, mind-boggling super ability to internally focus and all of a sudden get swollen, jacked, and whatever. That's not the way it works. So to anyone who was looking for that outcome, I'm sorry, but that's what steroids are for. Please do not do steroids. I do not condone it by any means necessary. This is not, let's just disclaimer, just because I've said that, please do not do them. They're not great. If you are going to do them, consult your doctor. Do them smart. Don't be stupid. Don't take them because Dave at the gym told you that it's a counter effect for the flu. Don't tell him don't believe Dave because he took a flu jab at the gym. Just don't do it. It's not worth it. Don't do it. Your balls will shrink. I'm telling you. Anyway, moving on. And ladies, if you don't have balls, if you start doing a lot of steroids, you might just have some in the end. Now, what was I saying about earlier? The fact that this is the other side of the argument. Now, this is very important to have for one reason, because it gives you the full story, the full picture. You cannot look at an argument one-sided because it won't make sense. Well, it will make sense, but that'll be cherry picking. We don't do that on this channel, okay? We don't. We're not cherry pickers. We're not strawberry pickers. We're not pickers of any form of kind, alright? So cut the shit and listen. What Halperin and Vygotsky found out, this was actually, again, this was in response to Catalude's, they challenged Catalude, whatever the hell their name is, Catalude's paper, and they raised some pretty valid points. Okay, there's a lot of valid points in here, and to be honest, this is what made me really question whether it's worth doing this kind of thing. So yeah, also anyone who's on the YouTube, that over there, I really apologize you guys have to see this, but that's my collection of stuffed animals, apparently. Right there. There it is. Apologies, but I thought I'd share that with you. I don't sleep with them, no. They're just there because I went to Marwell, I went to Longley, and I thought, you know what? Be nice to get a little memoir. Now, back to the important things. Sidetracking. It's bad. Don't do it. Anyway, so Halperin and Vygotsky had a look at their paper, and were like, you know what? Nah, that ain't it. That ain't it, Chief. I'm capping it. I'm calling a Colin Kaepernick. So, what did they challenge? So they actually referenced quite a few papers in this. So I actually looked through most of these papers, and I was like, oh wow, okay, that's cool. So they spoke about a study that Wolf did in 2013. Wolf with a W, with a U, not an O. Not a W, a U, not an O. Wolf. My guess is they're German. Now, external focus leads to superior performance and learning. My guess is what they mean by performance, they mean actual performance. So let's say strength, power, speed, performance, not performance of the exercise, not increase in hypertrophy or whatever. Internal focus decreases force participants are able to apply in a single and multi-joint exercise. Again, by Wolf in 2013. This really got me thinking. Internal focus decreases force participants are able to apply. I would be really interested in seeing that, because how do I explain this? When you're trying to think, right, when you're trying to think about pushing, so a lot of people will say things such as push the ground away from you when you're deadlifting. Whenever I think of doing that, I tend to do worse than when I just pick the bar up and try and lift it. It's interesting. I'm really curious to why that happens. At the same time, I don't internal focus decrease. I don't know, man. They also go on to say that it also reduces the number of reps people are able to do in dynamic exercises such as the bench press. So it can decrease your force. It can decrease the number of reps you can do. So for a power lifter, this has got no form of practicality whatsoever. Nothing. It's useless. So if you are a power lifter or some form of weightlifter, if you weightlift, this will be useless to you. Basically, what I'm saying, it will be really useless, and it would actually be counterintuitive. And it says at this point it is unclear whether greater EMG activity equals greater hypertrophy. Yeah, which I completely agree with. Look, overall, what I'm getting from this is that there's good evidence towards some form of hypertrophy, but there's no evidence really, like, not solidifying it, but really saying, you know what, this is really good. There's no form of evidence that will say this is actually a really good thing to do if you're trying to get bigger or whatever. Again, internal over here, it's clear the fact that Wolf found that it decreases the force, it decreases the amount of reps. So again, if you're a powerlifter, if you're a weightlifter, and like hypertrophy isn't your end goal, it ain't for you, Chief. It's not. It'll actually damage your performance. It will damage what you can do in the gym. And it's not a better method of training. Now, we also need to bring this up, because obviously this is fairly common thing that I see a lot of girls doing in the gym, and I think it's I don't know how I feel about it, is what I want to say. a lot of girls in the gym will, again, start off with doing like glute raises or kickbacks or whatever bullshit they do for whatever girls, whatever you do for your ass, like, you know, all that kind of stuff. You guys will start doing that, and then I don't know if this will help you. I don't think it's worth spending your time on it. I think you'd be a lot better compensated if you were spending your time trying to do something such as stretching or dynamic stretching or stuff like that actually reduces the chance of injury. When you're in the gym, it's a lot more of the exercises you're doing instead of your pre-workout routine shit. Okay, so what I'm trying to say, what I'm trying to basically get across is that instead of doing like glute raises or whatever, go into the gym, do a little bit of a warm-up, alright? Nothing too crazy, like 5 minutes, 10 minutes on the treadmill, 15 if you've got that time. Do 5 minutes on the treadmill, 5 minutes of dynamic stretching, you're good to go. Again, if you're lifting much heavier weights, please do considerably more than this. I'd recommend anywhere between 15 to 30 minutes of warm-ups and stretches and stuff. But if you do simply just go there just to, you know, get a booty pump, take a couple of pictures and fuck off, then do a little bit of a warm-up, go in and do exactly what I tell you right now, okay? Go in, do the following: sumo deadlifts, number 1. Number 2, hip thrusts with a bar where you can overload. Number 3, glute kickbacks or donkey kicks or whatever the hell you want to call them. And for God's sake, please stop doing that shit where you go on the Stairmaster, you do a step, and then you fully extend your leg backwards. That doesn't do shite. Alright, just stop. If anything, it's actually hurting your back. Instead of doing things like, you know, donkey kicks or whatever to activate your muscles, stretch out instead. It'll probably be a lot better for you. It'll probably be a lot more beneficial in the long term. Will, you know, less muscle strains, less pulled muscles or whatever the hell you want to call them. Less injuries overall, man. It's just not worth it. I wouldn't recommend it. And yeah, no, fully just it also looks stupid. I'm sorry, but it does. You just sat there doing like tiny little activation exercises so you can get the blood pumping to them. Fuck off. Don't do that shit. Just literally go in, warm up, do some stretches. As I said, replace your like activation crap with stretches and you'll be grand. Again, much better for you, much better for your muscles. Your muscles will love you for it. Your joints will. That was my water bottle falling. My apologies. Your muscles will thank you for it. Your joints will fucking love you for it, and they will then thank me. So, win-win-win. So, let's quickly end off on a conclusion here. There is a mixture of evidence arguing both sides of the argument. Overall consensus: internal focus or muscle activation or mind-muscle connection or whatever is beneficial in some way or another. To the extent in which it's beneficial is questionable. However, looking back at Schoenfeld, it does aid, like as I said, elbow flexor hypertrophy. And then looking back at Halperin, it reduces number of reps you can do. It also reduces the force that you can output. So, depending on what your goal is, if you want to get bigger and you want to waste most of your time, feel free to do that. But again, remember that, as I said, Schoenfeld had a 8-week program, and it was only a 2mm increase, and this was in untrained men. So 2mm in untrained men, as they go on, they will literally need about a year Actually, no, it's a lot more than a year. They will need it will be about a year to put on at least 1.5 centimeters of muscle on, which again, that tends to happen normally anyway. Be really interested to see in a control what they found, because obviously 2.14 is great, but I'd wonder if they were to have a control group who didn't focus on either of them, and they literally just went to the gym, did their own thing, what would the difference be? But with that being said, as said, this will be a little bit of a shorter episode. So, got a lot of fluff on my jumper. By the way, anyone who's watching on the YouTube and you like the jumper, Hercules, absolutely amazing. It's really comfy. I'm literally wearing this, nothing else under. It's actually managing to keep me warm, and it's really fluffy, and I bloody love fluffy clothes. I can literally, I've worked out in it, I've slept in it, I've gamed in it, I've pretty much done everything in it. But yeah, no. So if you fancy it, then Hercules with an X instead of a U. Tell Jack I sent you. I'm sure he'll appreciate it, and he'll love you for it. But thank you guys for listening. I really appreciate each and every one of you. I apologize, this was a sub 40-minute episode. However, I need to go smash up some weights, and to be honest, this subject was one of the easiest to research that I have researched in a while. So that was it was a relief, because for the previous one, for the different splits, I literally did hours and hours and hours and hours of research. And this one here, I had to look up internal versus external focus, mind-muscle connection, muscle activation, and like 4 really good papers popped up. So I was like, right, great, cool. So that's not to say that I didn't further research it, but the 3 to 4 papers that popped up were bloody amazing. So I was like, at least I've got those to be 100% on. So thank you everyone for watching. I appreciate it. If you would be ever so kind as to share this podcast with on your story or anything like that, be greatly appreciated. It takes about 5 seconds. And if you're watching on YouTube or Apple Music, I don't know if Apple Music actually has a comment section or anything like that, review section, but give us a comment, give us a like, give us a review. Follow the podcast for more. We try to upload every single week. I try to upload every single week. And yeah, thank you guys for joining. I thoroughly hope you appreciated it. And yeah, drop me your suggestions at the N.E.S.T Cast on Instagram, at the N.E.S.T Cast on Facebook, and at Alex Amoginos on Instagram for me, your boy, and on TikTok. Actually, getting really close to 20k followers. Please help me out, help a brother out. But thank you for watching. I appreciate every one of you, and I will see you all next week, where we will be covering the most useless supplements. That one's going to be good fun. But thank you guys. I'll see you all next week. Have a great rest of your week. Again, YouTube, apologize for not having last week's episode up. However, have a double whammy. I'll see you all next week. Have a good rest of your week. And the countdown to Christmas is now on. Only 11 days. Only 11 days away from the Monday that I'm recording this. From Wednesday it'll be 9 days away, but we'll skip past that small deal. So 9 days away. Pretend I didn't say 11. But thank you guys for watching and listening. I'll see you all next week. Have a good rest of your week, and until then, eat your fucking vegetables.